All right. Welcome, everybody. Good night or good evening. Um, this is the second to last class. We're going to be covering logo design, talking about what identity design is a little bit. And that's pretty much what I hope to cover before this course is over. And then any time for questions about anything you had a question about. All right, so we've spoken about many different kinds of design, many different types of design. And the kind of final category that we're going to be speaking of is identity design. And identity design is what we call a collection of visual tools that identify one seller's goods or services as a distinct from those of other sellers. And last week we spoke about the marks that ancient craftsmen or pottery makers would leave on their work that would identify their work as being something that belongs to them. And therefore, it's kind of like putting your signature on something, saying that I stand behind this product. And identity design, or what it's sometimes it's called branding, is the way that a company really kind of puts their name out there, or and the way they interact with their consumers in a visual kind of way. So a identity system can contain typefaces, colors, it could contain illustrations, and then finally, right, a logo or a word mark. Right, so some companies, when we talk about typefaces, some companies or businesses have their own typeface that's designed for them. For example, this is YouTube Sans. YouTube has their own typeface. One of the reasons this could be is because we spoke about when we first started talking about typography, is that typefaces need a license and they're expensive. And for very big companies, they could be very expensive because a lot of times the license, you need a different license if you have a lot of people visiting your website, or you need for example, like YouTube. So sometimes it's cheaper for YouTube to have their own typeface that they pay a one-time fee for and they own it. And this is something called a word mark. We're probably familiar with what a logo is, but this is what a word mark is a logo that is created of the company's name, right? And obviously many different ways, visual expressions that you can use even within a typographical approach to a logo. Right, so this would be what we usually think of a logo, and this is also a logo, but it's just the word, the name of the company, and then it's stylized to, be unique and ownable. I thought it would be interesting to. I know we've done this before a little bit. Right, but I wanted to walk through what an identity system would look like for Uber, right? Uber rebranded, I don't remember when. And I wanted to just scroll down. There's a whole bunch of stuff here. But we can see the different kind of categories, different pieces of their system. So we have the logo, we have a color system, we have a composition, which can mean anything from how the typography is laid out, what grid do you follow, how do you use, oh, I did not want to click on that. Did I click on it? No. Right? Icons, that could be like, for example, arrows or different app icons, illustration style. They even have part of their identity system includes motion, how things move, photography style, right? Because Uber is such a big company that they can be specific about what kind of photos they choose to use and what kinds of photos they don't. Tone of voice would be even the style of writing. When they on social media or in advertising, what is their style of writing read like? And then finally, typography. And Uber again had a company design a typeface for them that is their own. So these are 9 different pieces of an identity system, and we are mostly just going to focus, at least for this class, we're going to focus on just the logo. The reason why I presented all of this is to show that there is a lot of different pieces that we're not covering, mostly because perhaps we'll cover it next class, but it's just a little difficult to cover that range. So if we're going to focus on the logo, I thought it'd be interesting to go over my process of a recent logo project. And I'm not really showing off my work as much as I would have appreciated, or I still would appreciate, having someone who's a little bit ahead of me in experience to kind of break down exactly how they work. And if I find it educational, that would be cool. If I find it helpful, some kind of tip that I never thought of, or it would just be nice to realize that there is like a human process behind how these things are created. So, so this was a project for Chabad.org. And this is an example. The project was for an app called Daily Study. You can see it at the top left corner. This is their old app logo icon. And the Daily Study app has like a bunch of Torah on it that you could learn. It's updated. There's like updated content. So every time you log on it, there's something appropriate for that day. And what they were doing is that they were relaunching the app with a whole bunch of new features and capabilities, functionality. And so they wanted to indicate in their new app icon that this is a new app. It's not just like a small tweak, it's like a big overhaul, big redesign. So they were looking for someone to redesign the look. Now, their apps, if you can see, not all of these are Chabad.org apps, but quite a few of these are. There really isn't a very consistent theme to the look of their app icons outside of that they're blue. They're blue and that they're maybe a solid shape. So there already isn't like a very strong place to start from. And they spoke about how they would like to redo all of them at some point, but they don't really have the time to do that. So that's kind of what I was stepping into. They also had a designer that they worked with previously in this project who did not, for whatever reason, they decided not to continue working with him. But they did like some of the stuff that he did. So that was kind of a starting point where I could see what they liked and see what they felt was appropriate. So then I had a phone conversation with the client, and I was trying to understand a couple of things. I was trying to understand what kind of person would use this app, and therefore who would this logo have to appeal to? And then I was also trying to understand what exactly is new and unique about this app. So when it comes to the person who was using it, there wasn't a clear idea. It wasn't very specific. It was basically targeted to anybody and everybody. But what they wanted to, like the value of the app and what they wanted to communicate about it was that it's your companion for daily study. And that their idea was that you would open it every single day and use it to learn something Jewish every single day using their app. So that was pretty much it, pretty vague. Let me just make sure I'm covering everything. Now, even though they didn't have a consistent look for their apps, they wanted they wanted the new icon to fit in some way with what they already had. Okay, so right, like I said, so I started by noting the common pattern. I'm like, okay, if I needed to fit in within the current icons, what do they have? Well, they're all some shade of blue usually, and they have some kind of like shape and then some kind of title, right? So that was where I started with. And this is not my logo. These are this is some of the work that the person that they were working with, the designer they were working with previously, had sent them. And the bottom left is the one that they liked the most. It's like sort of simple, you know, it could work in black and white. And that was something that we spoke about last week, how a good icon, a good symbol, a good logo could work in black and white, and it's just a very solid, strong shape. So that actually had something to it. So what I started with is what I started with is I went online and I looked at a bunch of icons, like book-centered icons. And then I mean, this is a little bit of a poor photo, but I printed out a bunch of these, and then I just started sketching them, like literally redoing them. And the reason I do that is because sometimes starting with scratch, starting from scratch is kind of overwhelming, right? And I'm not sure where to start. So on the one hand, it's just nice to even start tracing over and sketching other people's work. Obviously not as a final direction, but as just a starting point, kind of like an exercise. And then the other thing is that I think a lot of these logos are really good, and starting off a project by kind of getting a feel for like the shape of a good logo, I really like that. It really gives me a boost. So that's what I start with. I start with just tracing these over in my notebook, and then I start adding to them. You know, oh, what if I change this? What if I change that? Add this, add that, and that kind of gets me started off creatively. And these are already some of the sketches that we're looking at, and you can see some of them I carried over from the previous. I carried over from someone else's, from the original logos, not mine. And I tried a bunch of different stuff, right? Because I wasn't really sure what was correct or how abstract or literal I should be. So I'm like, okay, open pages, maybe you see like outlines, maybe like the books kind of circle around, kind of like a cycle. That was also something they really mentioned that they liked, like a cycle. Maybe like a to-do list, kind of check mark. That's what you see on the left, kind of like, and all the while it's kind of like stumbling through the dark a lot of times. I'm not really completely sure what the right solution, what the right direction is. I'm trying like putting in an olive, putting it into a calendar, all these like different visual directions that I wanted to, and that I was exploring basically even before I got into the computer. Okay, so I'm just gonna move through this a little bit. Okay, so this is the first option. The first option was kind of like this logo based on a triangular grid. If you look, you can see that there's kind of like these, a triangle from the bottom of the book and moving up. And the idea here really was something just very clean, all very kind of generic, and very straightforward. It's a book, then the flame is the logo of the Chabad.org organization. And that's it. And their feedback was pretty much like, this is good, this is already great, but we want something a little more ownable, a little more distinct. You know, we could, like they said, like we could use this if you don't come up with anything better, but we would like something that feels a little more like it belongs to us. So this is the second and final solution. We tried a couple more, but this is the final one. And this is when I presented to them at the end, I presented it in something called a mock-up, which is usually it's a mock-up is basically kind of putting your design into a real world environment to make it look like it's living in the real world. So I didn't actually take this photo, but I used a file that I found online, a Photoshop file that allowed me to kind of just pop my design into this screen of someone else's file. And so that's called a mock-up. And I personally use Photoshop a lot of the time to put my mock-ups in there. And it's just a good idea. I like using it because I think it gives the clients a good idea of how how they could use my work in the real world. So these are like the three different kind of basic ideas I thought were included in the logo. There's like cycle, like the books are kind of moving around. Then there's like the negative space in between is like a play button, right? Like a play button, like because the app has audio video capabilities, like there are videos, classes you can watch and classes you could listen to, and then right, obviously that they're Sapphire in their books. So this was the final option that they picked, that they liked. And then I showed what would it look like next to a couple of the other apps that they had. And then finally, I showed the colors. This is in the final presentation. I showed the colors and the hex code for the colors that that I use in the logo. Okay, great. Here. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go through how we could design a couple of logos. These are pretty popular logos, and we are going to design them and using our kind of Illustrator chops. And I hope that in the process, we're going to learn a little bit about how we could create logos on our own. So the first one we're going to do or recreate really is the Chase logo. Move that over there. Okay, so this is kind of like, this is usually a little difficult when we do this, where it's like follow along with me as I do it, but we're going to give it a shot and I'll try to move at a good pace. So the first thing we're going to start with when we open our Illustrator file is we're going to make just a circle. Okay. And we're going to start by laying down a grid that the logo will then work within. Okay, so now once we have that, the circle, we're going to make a small square on all sides of it, kind of like the way we lay down a margin for a for some kind of like for a flyer or something. We're going to set down like 4 smaller squares, any side of our circle, and we're going to drop down guides on either side of the square. This is what we want it to look like. Mess that up. Okay. Lock guides. Okay. Are we all able to do this? Okay. Okay, so that's what we started off with, and now now I'm going to make a square. Like that. I'm going to make a square that fills. That goes from the inside of the edge to edge. That's difficult to describe, right? But it goes from top to bottom of the inner guides. Later on, we're actually going to talk about the creation of the Chase logo and kind of a little bit of the story behind it. Okay, so this is what we want it to look like, actually. And then I'm going to drop further guides on top of that. And at this point, I'm going to delete the smaller squares. I don't really need them. And I actually don't even need a circle. So that's what we want it to look like right now. Okay. Now, the next, excuse me, the next kind of step, if you just watch my screen for a second, the next step is going to be to pull out the square. Let's say the top square, we're going to pull it out so it kind of goes over that little gutter. This is what I mean, right? Pull it and just going to drag it just like that. And then, pretty simple, I'm going to make a triangle using my pen tool. Going from the edge of the bottom edge of my top square, then going to the end of my guide, to the top like that. Maybe I'll change the color so you can tell what's going on, okay? Again, remember guys, I have no I have no idea where everyone's holding. So if you have a question or you want me to slow down or something, just let me know, Q&A or in the chat or something. And then continue to do that for the remaining 3. Like that. Okay. Ooh, what's happening over there? We're basically turning our squares into a little bit of a rectangle. And someone asked why I use a circle. There's no reason. For this example, they both have this, they would have the same proportions. I just thought since we're using squares, it might be easier to differentiate what's what with a circle. And then also, if you're gonna, well, I'll show you the initial sketch, the first sketch for the Chase logo, actually use the circle. So I just thought it would be cool to kind of recreate it exactly. And then that's the final step. Again, we're using some very basic boom, there you go. Turn up my guides, and now we have the Chase logo. Okay, was everyone able to follow that? The feedback I'm getting is, or I'm assuming that most people are. Right, like we're using just the square tool. And then I'm using the pen tool to make guys. I'm using the pen tool to make these like kind of triangles, these perfect 90-degree triangles. Just to go over that again, right? Hitting P on my keyboard to pull up the pen tool, and then I'm drawing these 90-degree triangles. Okay. That seems to, for the majority of the class, be really simple. So we're going to move on to the next kind of logo we're going to recreate, which is the target logo. Delete that. I just want to have enough space. Okay, so the target logo is really simple. We're going to be using the Pathfinder tool. Let's start by, again, just making a circle. Okay, we're going to start by making a circle. And now I'm going to copy it by holding Alt-Shift and then click and drag, and then doing that one more time till I have 3 circles perfectly stacked on top of each other. Okay. Right, 3 circles stacked on top of each other. And let's say just for clarity's sake, I'm going to make the bottom one into like a red color. And that's going to be the one I don't change. You'll see what I mean. Okay, so with these three circles stacked on top of each other, now I want you to make, I'm going to select the red one, the bottom one, and I'm going to copy paste it, Control C, and then we could go to Edit, Object, Paste in front, okay? And now holding Shift, I'm going to scale it up to the top of the of my second circle. So now I have something that looks like this. Okay. Then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to select the circle, this like kind of outline. I turned it into an outline. And I recommend you do the same to make it a little bit easier to see what's going on. Then I'm going to copy it again, Control C. Let's go to Object, paste in front, and then scale it up. Okay, so this is what I want it to look like. Okay, and I moved it to the top of the third circle. The reason why I'm using these three circles is because I want the weight to be consistent throughout the whole thing. The weight meaning the thickness of this line and this line. Okay, so now that I have these two outlines, I'm going to select both of them. And then I'm going to open my Pathfinder window. I'm going to go to Window, select Pathfinder, and I'm going to select the option called minus front. If you're looking at the Pathfinder window, there are 2 rows of icons of different Pathfinder presets. And I'm going to select the second one from the left. Do that, fill it. Ugh. Send that to back. The reason why that didn't work is because the arrangement of my circles was that the big one was at the top and the small one was at the bottom. Someone asked if I go over it again, so I will gladly go over it again. Again, I'm going to select the bottom circle, Control C to make a copy of it. Then I'm going to go to Edit, paste in front, and then drag, using Shift, drag it to the top of my second circle. And just so you can see what's going on, I'm going to turn it into outlines just for this. And then I'm going to do that again, one more time. Say I select the second circle, copy it, go to Edit, paste in front, and then this time drag it to the top of the third circle. And I'm going to turn it into outlines just so we can see what's going on. Okay. I made it into an outline. There are 2 ways to make something to swap the fill and the outline. You could go to the left-hand panel at the bottom. There's that double-headed arrow, and by clicking that, it will move the color from fill to stroke and back. Or you can select a shape and hit Shift X, and every time you hit, just hold down Shift and then press X, and every time you click X, it will swap the stroke to the fill. So now that we have these 2 outlines, I'm going to change top one, I don't know, change it to some kind of gray. And then this red one, I'm going to shift it like that. Okay, great. I don't really need that anymore. So now this is kind of what I want to see. I want to have change that. Okay. So this is what I want to see, okay? I want, like, they're kind of layered on top of each other, kind of, where the biggest circle is all the way at the back. The medium-sized circle is on top of the one all the way in the back, and then the smallest one is at the center, okay? And this is how you should see it for the next step. So the next step is really we're going to knock out kind of like a donut hole out of my gray circle over here. And that's simply by going to the Pathfinder window and then the icon at the top, top row, second to left. When I hover over it, it says minus front. And when I click that, that's what gets minused. Now, this is not exactly the target logo. Target logo, this is just a little bit bigger, just for visual sake, kind of. But that's basically it, right? Now I want to make sure that everyone's up to speed with that. So does anyone want me to go over anything in specific before we move on to creating the next logo? Someone asked if I can slow down. I will gladly slow down. Someone asked me to review the target one. You want me to redo it, the whole thing? I don't mind, but maybe there's a specific thing that you're, okay, I'll go over it. So this is how I did it. I'm sure there's plenty of ways to go about it. And if you come up with a different way, go ahead and try it. This is how I did it. I made 3 circles and I stacked them. And like I stack them exactly edge to edge. And I do that by holding down Alt and Shift on my keyboard and then selecting the circle, selecting the object and clicking and dragging until it looks like it's exact. That's the first step. Next, selecting the bottom, of the 3 circles. I'm going to change the color again just because I'll change the color of all of them. I want there to be some clarity over here. It's not very clear. Okay, great. So we'll start by copying and then going to edit, paste in front, and then dragging my copied circle to the top of the second. That's what I want it to look like. I'll make that white. Okay, so, well, pink. No. Okay, so, right, we have a circle over here. Now I'm going to copy that, Control C. I'm going to go to edit, paste in front, and drag until the top of the red circle. I'll make that a different color. I'm running out of shades over here. Okay, so right now we don't have any outlines, right? We're not using any outlines. We just have, I can delete that for now. I can delete that for now. I have 3 different circles. I have this one and right the width, the space from this edge to this edge, and then this edge to this edge is exactly the same right now. And then I just select the 2 bottom ones. I basically select the 2 shapes that I want to use the Pathfinder on. Then selecting them, I go to the Pathfinder window, which I could open by going to Window and going to Pathfinder. And then with, I have 2 rows of icons, but I'm going to go to the top row, and the second to left option is called minus front, and I'm going to select that. Boom, and that's what I have. I have kind of like this donut. If I move it, you can see that this is I knocked it out basically. And I'm just going to scale up the circle in the middle because for some reason, even though it's the same size, that everything's right, we use exactly the same size, it just looks a little too small. And that's kind of something you have to pay attention to, that visual trick that happens sometimes when you have a very big open space next to a small shape. Sometimes you need to make it bigger just for it to look the same. And then you target their logos red, so make it red. Okay, great. I think we're ready to move on to the next one. This is not a famous logo. This is just kind of like a shape. And we're gonna recreate it. All right. So we're gonna start by making a few boxes. We're gonna make a row of 3. I just hit Command D to copy that. So I made a single box, then I hit Alt Shift click drag to move it seamlessly on top. And I'm going to change that color a little bit for you. Okay. And then selecting the second box, I just hit Command D, or we can just drag it up. Okay, great. Now I'm going to just make sure it's well, technical difficulties over here. Okay. I'm just changing the color for now. The color, right? You can see that the logo is in black for now. So we have these 3 squares stacked on top of each other, and now I'm going to copy it across. Just flip it just for clarity's sake. Okay. Okay. I don't know. I don't know what's going on over here. I'm just trying to differentiate it so you guys can get like a visual, some visual clarity. Okay, so these boxes are not actually that necessary. I'm going to make, technically I could just, I'm going to take the one on the bottom right, and I'm going to scale it up to the size. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys. Okay. Basically, this is what I want it to look like. I have a square, and then I have 2 squares at the center of it. But the space, because I use those squares to kind of construct that space, I have a little bit of like a margin and a consistency all around. Okay. Okay, great. So that's the first step. I just want to make sure the color is just to differentiate. Now the next step is to kind of copy it over. Put that at the back. Change the color there. Okay, so what I have now is 2 shapes basically. Not 2, yeah, 2 pairs of shapes. I have these 2 squares, and then on top of those 2 squares, I have another pair of squares. Now, what I want to do is to my kind of shapes at my right-hand corner, I want to increase its height by a single unit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do this, right? I'm going to make another, going to increase the height like that, okay? I added 2 squares to my right hand side, and then I'm just going to delete the top one so that I increase it by 1. I hope this makes sense. Like I practice going over it, like how I'll teach it, but I don't know if verbally it's coming over very clearly. So let me know. I imagine this could be a little confusing, especially if you're not using 2 screens. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions right now, so I'm going to go forward, but feel free to ask. Okay, so the first step to this, first step to this is we're going to select the right corner using our direct selection tool, which we pull up by pressing A on our keyboard, or we go to the left-hand panel and we click on the white arrow, which would be at all the way at the top, left-hand tool panel. So we hit A, and then we'll select the point at the top right of our first square, and then holding Shift. Okay, so it's important to hold Shift. We're going to go to our second square and also select the top right corner. Okay, so A, and then select top right corner, and then holding Shift down, we're going to select the both top right corners of both shapes. Okay. Now with that selected, I'm simply going to hold Shift and the down arrow keys. Okay. To do that. That's it. Or you can drag, holding Shift, you can drag down. Okay. And now we're going to kind of use the same formula, those same steps, but we're going to do that for the squares on the inside. We're going to use, okay, again, we can use a direct selection tool, and we're going to select the top left corner of the two center squares. And again, I'm holding Shift and using the down arrow key, or you could hold Shift kind of like that and just drag down. Okay, so we're pretty close to being done. The next step. Okay, the next step is that I'm going to select kind of the squares at the inside, the smaller squares, go into the Pathfinder window. I'm going to just do this just in case. Let me go over it again. I'm going to go to the Pathfinder window and I'm going to select Unite. Actually, I wanted to show you guys a new tool, and it's called the Shape Builder tool. The Shape Builder tool is a pretty cool tool. Let's see. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so the Shape Builder tool is a tool that allows you to. Okay, someone asked if I could show them how to make it slanted. Sure. So the way I did that is to make them slanted the exact same angle, is I used the direct selection tool, and I selected the top right point of both shapes, and then with both of those selected, I simply either holding Shift or using holding Shift down, I can either drag or I would use the arrow keys. But why isn't that straight? Okay, yeah. So the Shape Builder tool is really, really cool and really, really basic. It allows you to connect. It allows you to merge a bunch of shapes or to subtract a shape from another shape, right? Using the basic functionality of the Pathfinder tool, but it's more organic. So again, let's pull that up. either hit Shift M on your keyboard. Well, first select the shapes. Either hit Shift M on your keyboard, or I can't even describe it on the left-hand panel. It's like an arrow with two circles. I think it's easier to just pull up Shift M, and now my cursor has a little plus next to it. And that tells me that the Shape Builder tool is activated. With the Shape Builder tool activated, there are basically two functions. There's the merge tool, and then there's the subtract tool. The merge tool is exactly what it sounds like. You hover over the shapes that you want to edit, and you just drag, right? You see what I did there? You drag over both shapes that you want to merge. So we can see what just happened is that my smaller square became united with my bigger square, and that is done with the merge tool, with the Shape Builder tool. And it will show you kind of this, like, zoom in, it's kind of like grayed out a little bit, and that tells me that, hey, you're about to do something with this shape, right? When I hover off of it, it becomes its normal color, and then I can't edit it. So I have to hover over the shapes that I want, and I'm clicking and dragging. That's an important point. I'm clicking and dragging, and then when I let go, my edit is recognized. Now, what I want to show you is a very easy way to kind of knock out shapes, and that is that once we are inside of the Shape Builder tool, right? So my arrow has a plus, and this only comes up when I select all the shapes that I want to be editing. Okay, if I don't have anything selected, my Shape Builder tool won't work, right? It'll be this white arrow with like a circle with a cross through it. That tells me that, hey, you haven't selected the shapes that you want to use. So I'm going to select all of them, press Shift M, right? Shift and M together to pull that up, or in the left-hand panel, you could find it with some kind of obscure icon. Okay, so now then there's the unite function of the Shape Builder tool, and then there's the minus one. So with my Shape Builder tool selected, I hold down Alt on my keyboard, and that will change the arrow, the plus sign to a minus sign. Okay, let me just show you what happens when the minus sign is selected. Now I'll select. You see that? You see what happened there? It knocked out the shape that I selected instead of uniting it. It deleted that. Okay? I'm going to make these black now. And then a final step would be, I don't know if you have to do this. I'll just leave it at that. Okay? So that's how we did this kind of, I don't know, kind of like it could be like a real estate logo. A lot of angles. Excuse me. Okay. So we learned a new tool. We learned the Shape Builder tool. Again, just to kind of give a demonstration of how that will work. Make a circle. Make another circle, and then selecting the Shape Builder tool. Well, I have to select both shapes that I want to edit. Then I'll select the Shape Builder tool, and when I drag over, I can drag over only a few of the pieces, all of the pieces, and now it's a single shape, okay? Or I can hold down Alt, Shift M, Alt, and I knocked out the center of those two shapes. Okay, so it's a very simple tool, but it's really useful. And a lot of times I like using it more than the Pathfinder tool because it just allows me to drag, to unite a bunch of shapes together just by dragging, clicking and dragging. And the same thing, it also allows me to easily knock out, to delete a shape just by using my mouse. I don't have to use the Pathfinder window. Ooh. Okay, great. So let us jump back in here. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about the famous logo designer you've never heard of. His name is Paul Rand, and his real name is Peretz Rosenbaum. But when he started in the 50s, or probably earlier in the 50s, like probably in the 40s, when he started trying to get design work in America, he realized that he probably is not going to get a lot of work, or I don't know if he realized, but he decided that it would be better if he goes by Paul Rand versus Peretz Rosenbaum. So he changed his name, and that's what he started going by. He was one of the first designers in America to take on the modern Swiss style and introduce it to American design. So at the time, it wasn't very modern, it wasn't very clean, and he was a person who was he was one of the few people that like started using that very clean and modern style in his work. Just want to make sure this is being shared. Okay, great. And he worked largely in the 1950s. What happened there? He worked largely in the 1950s, and this is what he looked like when he was old. And he did a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff. Packaging. He did a lot of logos, a lot of very famous logos. And one of the famous logos that he did was the IBM logo. IBM is stands for the International Business Machine. They started off by making computers, which used to take up, well, I don't know initially what they started off doing in 1988, but they got very big and popular when they started selling computers for businesses. And Paul Rand came along and I think he didn't do the versions before, but in 1956, he changed up the logo from the one from 1946, and he made it a lot more bold, a lot more recognizable and distinct. There's a little more geometry to it. And so he changed the font to something that looks stronger. And that was all he did when he changed the logo, right? And then in 1972, he added these horizontal bars to the logo. And there's like a 8 count bar, and then there's like a 13. There's like 2 versions of the logo that exists now that IBM uses now. And one has like 8 bars and one has like something, I don't know, like 16 or something. And depending on the situation, that's how they will decide to use it. And there's some of the sketches from Paul Rand is like a prisoner next to the IBM logo, and like there really isn't a clear reason why. Some people would say it's that the point of adding the horizontal bars, the white bars, is to indicate like speed, like computers are fast or something, but mostly it was just to make it recognizable. And then ever since 1972, the logo hasn't changed at all. And that's going to be a recurrent thing we're going to see, is that really good logos don't have to change that often. Really good logos stay the same. That's really good logos don't have to change because they kind of follow all the basic principles. They're really good in black and white. They're very recognizable. They're unique. And therefore, the company doesn't feel compelled to change the logo. And this is what it looks like nowadays. This is what the current IBM logo looks like. And Paul Rand also designed he designed a logo for UPS. This one actually was changed. In 1961, he made the logo with the box and the bow on top. And the idea was that it's like UPS delivers packages. So why not show like the main thing that they do inside of their logo? And this logo, the black and white one that we see here, wasn't changed from 1961 until 2003, when UPS decided to change it to the one on the far right. They decided they wanted their logo to be a little more obscure, a little more like not specific to a product, right? And that's also interesting that when a company changes the logo, it's not only because there's some aesthetic, like, oh, I don't like it, but because they want to change something. How about how they communicate? They want to say, oh, we don't only do packages anymore. We do a whole bunch of other stuff. And therefore, we don't want to have like this visual of a package in our logo. Okay, so, but even then, 1961 to 2003 is a very long time and a very good lifespan for a logo. And then here's what the logo looks like or looked like at the side of a truck. And I think it's very nice. I think it's very nice and friendly. Okay, finally, the final logo that we're going to be talking about today, although Paul Rand did a lot of different logos. Westinghouse. Westinghouse is an electric company. I'm pretty sure it's still around. I don't know. I don't come across it very often. It was established in 1886. I don't have a year. Well, I do actually. Okay, so earlier versions of the Westinghouse logo, like the one we see here, just feature the letter W. And this is the first sketches, Paul Rand sketches of the logo. Of his redesign. So this was the one before. This is the one the company was using for a very long time, since 1886. And then in 1960, I think the year was. Yeah, in 1960, Paul Rand redesigned the Westinghouse logo to look like this, to look like a W with 3 lines and 3 circles. So he took the basic shape and then translated it into a cleaner, more unique, recognizable form. And some people say that it's meant to like suggest a circuit board, right? When you open a piece of machinery and there's some kind of circuit board, that's what you'll find, that's what you'll see. And right, so this is the logo, and it hasn't changed since 1960. Right? This is, I think, some kind of light display in Pittsburgh. Westinghouse company. I think it's established in Pittsburgh. This is an example of packaging. We can see the logo being employed over here in big, very recognizable, also very friendly. And then here is some kind of advertisement where they deconstructed the logo into just geometric shapes for some kind of advertising. Okay, good. Okay, great. I think, yeah. Okay, so we're gonna go back to Illustrator now. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to, I don't know if we'll get through all of it, but we're going to recreate some of these logos. Some of them using techniques we know, and some of them using techniques that we're going to learn. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do for this logo, and I'm going to try to keep it here just in case you guys want to reference it. The first thing we're going to do is, again, we're going to make a couple of squares. Again, I'm just trying to, there are many different ways to go about doing this, but I'm trying to go about it in a way that everyone can follow along and get the same result. Okay, so we're going to do very similar, we're going to do something very similar to what we did before. Okay. I'm just changing the color so we can tell what's going on. So I have 6 squares over here. And that's what you should have. You should have 2 rows of 6 squares. And then I'm going to make a sometimes I forget what I did. Okay, this is what we're going to do. Then we're going to make a triangle on top. I'm kind of blanking out how I did this. Okay. Let's just do it this way. Okay, then I'm going to make a square on top of that, or on the back. How do I describe it? Like this. I'm sorry, it's late. Okay, so I have 2 rows of 6 squares, and then I have this other square over here, okay? Now, I'm going to select the pen tool, and I'm going to hover over, let me zoom in. I'm going to hover over the top edge of my big square. Okay, I'm going to hover over it. And what I'm going to do is add a point at the center of my top edge. So it's kind of important. I want to add it at the exact center. And I'm going to kind of hover over the center of my square until my smart guide tells me, it kind of shows that I'm lining up with the very center of my square. And that's exactly what I want, okay? So again, I'm making a big square, selecting my pen tool, and then I'm hovering over the top edge of my square until my smart guides tells me that I'm directly over the center of my square. And then all I do is click. And what that does is now I have added a point. I've added an editable point to the top center of the top edge of my square. And then I'm going to select, I'm going to use my direct selection tool to select the points of the top corners of my square, and then drag down. I know I'm going to go over this again, but that's what I want it to look like, okay? Were there some people who were able to get that? Again, let's go over that again. I made a square. Then I opened up my pen tool and I hovered over the top edge of my square until this kind of magenta line appears from my smart guides. that tells me that I'm hovering over exactly the center. And then I'm going to click down, and that I've added a point to the center top of my square. And then I'm going to use my direct selection tool to select the point of the two corners of my square, and I'm going to drag down. Okay. Now, if that made sense, this won't. I'm kidding. We gotta make sure everything's lined up. Okay, great. Now, I'm gonna make this white. Again, it doesn't really look exactly right. It's okay for now. Okay, so now I deleted, so now I only have 4 squares. We can see what we're doing over here. There's really no squares on our left-hand side. So this is what we have, okay? Now, I want to make sure. Okay, so first, I'm going to select the top right corner of the square at the top right. Does that make sense? I'm going to select the top right corner of my orange square, and I'm just going to press delete. And that deletes that point and therefore turns it into basically a triangle. And I'm going to add a point. No. So now I'm going to open my pen tool, hit P on my keyboard, holding Shift. I'm going to draw a line from the top left corner of this kind of grayish square to the bottom right. Okay. You can give it a color just so it stands out. Okay. So you see this line I made? I made it across from the top left corner to the bottom right. And we're going to use our shape builder tool to delete a certain piece. Okay. So I'm going to select all of my shapes in my logo, hit Shift M to pull up the shape builder tool. And we can see that when I hover over certain objects, it tells me that I can edit it. And I can do 2 things. Since I made this line and it goes from edge to edge, it now, with the shape builder tool, I can now separate this like gray box into 2 different sections. So I could, by selecting the top, this part, I just turned it into a shape of its own. And then holding Alt, I can knock out the bottom shape. And now I have just basically the same thing, right? Shift M. Shift M pulls up the shape builder tool. That was a question somebody had. Shift M. Someone asked, is there a reason you can't delete the bottom left? You can't just delete the bottom left anchor. Again, there's many different ways we can do things, but what I wanted to do is delete the entire, that entire kind of triangular area. Okay, so you could delete it and then like, I don't know how you would do it. But now if you see, I can put a color behind it, right? Oh, and I'm sorry. And I forgot, we have this white square at the center that we also want to knock out. So I'm going to select Shift M. Wait, Shift M, and what I did there was I did Shift M, and then I clicked Alt until that little minus sign shows up, and I'm going to click it, and now hold Shift M. Now I'm using the Shape Builder tool again to group all of those different all these different shapes together, and now I basically have only two shapes. Okay, we'll get technical later. Yeah, and now okay, so what kind of rules, principles does this follow, right? It's very distinct, it's very simple silhouette. We could get a lot more technical in here, I think. For example, using the Shape Builder tool, I can now make these two separate shapes. For some reason I have this like line over here, just delete that. And now they could take on they could take on separate color. And I don't know if you noticed, but this is a house, but also an R. That's kind of cool. All right. Okay, so now the next one that I want to do, the next kind of logo that I want to do is this. And I'm going to show you how to do it. I don't know if we've gone over it, but the corner widget is pretty cool. It's a pretty cool tool. So let's say I made a shape. And I don't know, sometimes it's fidgety in my machine as well, but if we pay attention to these little circles at the corner of my shape, these are like rounded corner widgets, which means that when I hover over it, we can see that there's like a little curve that appears. Here, now we can see it. When I hover over these little circles, a little curve appears at the bottom of my cursor, and that tells me that I'm able to edit the curvature of my corners. And why is it not working? No. Like I said, it's a little fidgety at times. Okay. Just say I use my direct selection tool sometimes. I don't know. It's a little funky. I use my direct selection tool to select the corner, and now we can see that when I pull towards the center, the curvature of that corner changes. So it was first a sharp angle, and now I'm adding a curve to that corner. Okay, and I can either edit it manually by analog by just dragging towards the center and then dragging away from the center to add more less curvature to it, or with that corner selected, a new option pops up at the top panel called corners, and I can select it. There's a couple of different options, corner styles, and then there's also the radius. Basically, that means the extreme of the curve. And I can also just use the up and down arrows to increase or decrease it. Okay, so fairly simple. And I only did a single corner because I use my direct selection tool to only select one corner. I could select a bunch of corners using my direct selection tool and holding Shift, and then I just turned a square into a circle by changing the curvature of the corners so that with the circle anyway, it's right for that, for example, I'm just, instead of pulling out the corners at all, I'm just using the arrows at the top left, not top left, the top corner. What am I saying? And it only comes up when I select the direct selection tool. So that, okay. So let's start by making a square again. Lots of squares today. And then I'm going to make another square at the inside. Make it white. I'm going to make a circle just so I get the distance between my edges to be exact. I'd rather keep that. Okay, so this is what I'm looking at, okay? This is one shape. And this is another. Okay, so what I'm first going to do, and I want to kind of zoom out and show you what we're looking at. So this is what we're going to be doing. Let's say this is just a word mark, a custom word mark for a company. I'm going to select the top two corners by using the direct selection tool. And then I'm going to go to the corner area, the live corner area, and just going to press the top arrow until it's like completely rounded. And I'm going to do the exact same thing, holding shift, using the direct selection tool, exact same thing to the middle, to the bottom. Okay, so that's how we did this. Copy just for later, just in case. Okay, so now I'm going to use the shape builder tool to knock it out really easily. Shift M again, right? Shift M equals the shape builder tool. Shift M and then hold down Alt on your keyboard to knock out that inner shape. So now we have a lowercase n, a geometric lowercase n. And the next step to make the O, we already did that for the Target logo, but we can do that again. I'm going to make a circle, make sure it's the exact height of the lowercase n. And I'm going to just get the height right. Okay. Just to get the height right, I made a circle that went from the edges of the width of my lowercase n, and I placed it at the bottom of my soon-to-be O. Now I'm going to copy my black circle, paste in front, and then scale that down until, does this method kind of make sense? It's fairly simple, right? And then just save that somewhere else. Ooh. Then select the inner circle and the outer circle, Shift M, hold down Alt. Okay, so now I have a lowercase n and an O. And then fairly simple, right? We have an M in this logo is just two ends kind of stuck together. layered on top of each other. Boom. Okay, does that make sense? Hi, you had a question?
Hi, yeah. Once I use the Shift M tool, what do I use to, like, it's all covered with the little grid. Now what do I do to like chop it out, to knock it out?
You should just click, or that should work anyway. So here, let's say this is what we're looking at. Pull up my Shift M, and then with the grid, well,
I see that part. And then when I got that, I have it highlighted, but then what?
okay, so obviously it depends what you want to do. Let's say I want to merge these two shapes, okay? So
I'm actually working on the O, so I'm just trying to knock out the circle from the O.
okay, so then select both of them, and then
Okay.
select both of the circles, and then with the shift, with the shape builder tool activated, kind of, I want you to hold down Alt, okay? And what Alt does is, if the shape builder tool unites, when you press down Alt, the shape builder tool now kind of becomes a shape breaker, I guess, and just hover over the section that you want to delete and then click. I can do that again.
Yeah, why don't you? Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I have these two shapes.
Okay.
Then pull up the shape builder tool.
Okay.
And then with your shape builder, hover over the center of your circle.
Mm-hmm.
And then hold down Alt on your keyboard.
Okay.
And then click.
Alt and click. All right, I'll try it. Thank you.
Sure thing. Okay, great. Let's move on to the last lecture, I guess. Okay, so the final, not the final, but there's a very big design company called Chermayeff and Geismar and Haviv, and they're just the last names of the three partners, the three people who own the company. And they pretty much, all they do is logos. They've been doing logos since forever. I don't know how old the company is, but it's really old, and all they do is logos. So I wanted to walk through three different logos and kind of the story behind them. Okay, so these are the three partners. One is actually Israeli. And I think this guy passed away, Ivan Chermayeff. Okay, so the first project is National Geographic. National Geographic started as a nature magazine, probably in the 60s. And they had this very distinctive yellow border. They featured photography and journalism from all over the world, covering all different places. But National Geographic as an organization started growing beyond just a magazine. They started having merchandise and events and a bunch of different things, a bunch of different products and items that they sell and that they put their name on. So they needed some kind of logo that could help them move beyond just the magazine. So to establish a cohesive identity, the designers designed a logo based on the magazine's iconic yellow border or gold border. And they created a custom font for National Geographic, but this was the main thing, right? And this company is very famous for making extremely simple logos. And this is an example of how the logo would work as a kind of a watermark at the bottom of a photo. And this is an example of how the logo would work as a little mark on some kind of clothing or merchandise. Even when it's not yellow, it's pretty recognizable. And this is how it would look in some kind of digital display. It looks like an airport shop. So again, they took they took something that the company's been using for a really, really, really long time, and they applied it. They stripped a lot of the detail away, and now you just have this very simple geometric shape that could be used in many, many different applications. So if you remember, we were talking, or we spoke a little bit about the Chase logo, and we actually designed it using this exact grid. And this logo was created in 1961. You'll see a lot of these logos that we've looked at today, they're still around today. So a lot of them feel pretty modern, but they were created such a long time ago, and that's because they follow the basic principles of good logo design. So this is the story of the Chase, was that it was a bank, but it was also a really big building, the Chase. I think the Chase Bank recently bought a skyscraper at the time that this logo, the designers of the logo were hired to create it. And at the time, very few companies had like abstract symbols. Very few American corporations had abstract symbols. But the designers understood that the bank would benefit from a single symbol that would merge, I guess at the time, Chase, I don't know, it was merging or was born out of a merger between two very large companies. And they knew that because Chase is it's a financial company, it has the ability to kind of apply this abstract logo in many, many different places so that people can learn what it means, right? And at the time they presented this logo, I think there was like one of two owners of the Chase company, and one of them really liked it and one of them hated it. And he's like, this is not going to appear on anything. And it took him a while. It took him, I feel like it was a few months before he came around to liking the logo. And some people would say that the Chase logo is inspired by a kind of Japanese coin or maybe even a bank vault. But basically, it's just an abstract logo. It doesn't actually mean that much. It doesn't mean a lot or anything at all. But because of that, it's a container for a lot of what the company does. And we also can see how a good logo exists the test of time, and it can be applied to many different applications. Here it is at the bottom of the Chase building. Here it is being applied at Chase ATMs, and they did not have ATMs back then. Or digital ATMs or apps or whatever, but the Chase logo still works at all those different new applications because it's such a strong shape. Okay, so the final logo kind of case study is the Conservation International. It's an organization that does environmental work. It works with businesses and government to kind of come up with rules and regulations for how we could protect natural resources. And what we see here is the original logo from 1987, probably the youngest company we're speaking about so far. And the organization approached Chermayeff and Geismar to redesign their logo. And the problem was that they really liked their current logo, but they now had, it wasn't applying to many different places. You can imagine what this logo would look like if you made it really, really, really small, right? Like an inch tall on a document, it probably disappeared. And they also want it to come across as more of a confident, strong organization. And so the one on the right is the new logo. It's meant to represent Earth, underlined by like a strip of green. I'm actually not 100% sure what it's meant to be, but like Earth and then underlined by a strip of green, maybe saying that like Earth will only survive if we protect our green land or something. But the flexibility or the strength of the logo, if it's like a very simple silhouette, is that we can see all the different ways that it could work, right? It could work as a container for some kind of advertisement, container for imagery. It works really well on a small size on a coffee cup. Right? So it works really big, works really small. And it also works really well, right? We can see the word mark placed next to the logo. Here it's being used at some kind of conference. So this company, Tremaith and Geismar, is really, they're very good at using very simple shapes to capture what a company is about or communicate what a company is about. And I don't know, and stand the test of time. Okay, so I wanted to finish up with these two kind of logos. These abstract marks, they could really be anything. Okay, so for this kind of exercise, we're going to be using the corner widget tool. Okay, so select, make a square, and then open the direct selection tool and select 3 out of the 4 corners. Okay, and then I'm going to go to the corner widget tool and I'm going to max out, which means I'm going to add a curve to only 3 of the corners. And I'm going to remove, I'm going to make it as rounded as possible, basically. And once you can't hit the up arrow anymore, it's using direct selection tool to select only 3 out of the 4. Okay. All right, once I have that, I'm going to select my shape, and then holding Shift, I'm going to rotate. I'm going to rotate my shape simply by dragging. I'm holding Shift down, and then I'm rotating it by dragging it. And when you hold Shift, right, it locks the increments of your rotation to 45 degrees. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. Obviously, feel free to adapt this any way you'd like. Someone asked, how do you select 3 out of the 4 corners? You use the direct selection tool to select specific points, and then you select multiple points by holding down Shift. So you hit A on your keyboard to select the direct selection tool, and then hold down Shift to select multiple points at once. Okay, now I'm gonna continue on. Now I did copy, edit, paste in front, drag out. And now I again, I held down Shift and then I rotated it, and it locks it at and I'm going to be facing it that direction. Okay. Okay, now I want to make sure that I'm not really sure how to do that. Let's say this is good for now. If I wanted to do this for a client or I was about to ship it off to a client, I would try to be a lot more specific with. Okay. So that's that logo. I don't know what you would describe it as, some kind of abstract mark, a leaf or something. I don't know. Okay. Was everyone able to follow along with that? Do you want me to go over it? Okay, I'm going to go over the final kind of logo symbol going on. I don't know if you'd call it a logo, but we're going over basic geometric logos over here. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is make a circle. And then I'm going to click and drag. Turn them into outlines. Okay, I'm going to click and drag these circles until they overlap. Then I'm going to use the shape builder tool, Shift M, to, and then I'm going to hold down Alt to delete those two, to delete everything except the overlapping part of those two circles. Okay. Oh. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so that's what I'm kind of left with, this little leaf kind of teardrop. Then I'm going to make a circle. And we're going to be using the rotate tool to rotate this kind of leaf around the center. Black. Okay. Now with my, I want my circle and my leaf object to be perfectly centered. Okay. And then I'm going to press R on my keyboard. Actually, or you press R on your keyboard or go to the left-hand panel, and there's kind of like this arrow pointing to the left, the rotate tool. And then what we want to do is we want to rotate my gray leaf object around the center of my black circle. To do that, with this little crosshairs pulled up, which basically tells me that my rotate tool is activated, I'm going to hover over the center of my circle until a little title comes up that says center. Okay. And then I'm going to press Alt, click, I'm sorry, there's a lot of steps here. Pressing Alt and click pulls up my rotate menu. And then I could put in like an increment like 30 degrees. And that basically means that that's how frequently, or that's the angle it's going to rotate at. And then I'm going to press copy. Those are a lot of steps, I know. I'm totally happy to go over it again. And that is what I have left over. Okay, I'm totally happy to go over that. I know those are a few steps, but that's how we can use the rotate tool to kind of rotate an object around a center object. Someone asked me if I could go over the logo that we did before. I would love to. Do you want me to go over it step by step? Or is there something in specific that you would like help with? I don't know, I could go over the basic parts of it, I guess. Okay, I made a square. Then I pulled up my direct selection tool and selected any one of the corners. Then I held down Shift and selected another 2 corners until this is what it looked like, right? The points that are selected are in blue, and the point that isn't selected is kind of in white, and the live corner widget doesn't show up. Then I went to, with those 3 corners kind of selected, I went to my top menu and I went to the corner option, and I just pressed the up arrow until I maxed out the radius, meaning I removed as much as I can of the I don't know. I don't know the exact like function. I know that now I made them all curved. Okay, good enough. Then I held down Shift to adjust the to rotate it at a fixed increment. So I pointed it upwards, and then it's kind of like a step and repeat from there. Now I'm basically just doing it the same thing, but I'm holding down Shift when I rotate to okay. There you go. Is that helpful? Okay, so there are 5 minutes left of class. I wanted to let anyone ask a question that they wanted me to go over anything from any point in time.
Hi, okay, so I don't have a question about the class. I have a different question. I want to know, if I draw out a sketch on a piece of paper, how would I be able to transfer it afterwards to Illustrator?
What I would do is I would take a photo of it, and I would get that photo onto my computer. We've gone over, like, if you remember when we traced a sketch that I did in Illustrator, I took a photo of it, and then you could either email it to yourself, or I use Dropbox, which is like a a cloud hard drive that shares things between my phone and my computer. But it would be some kind of way, or you could use a camera and then put the SD card, put the memory card in your computer and take it off and then import it just like you would any other image into Illustrator.
And how would you do it with the email?
I would download, well, I would email it to my, I would use email, let's say I would photograph it on my phone. Let's say I took a photo of the sketch on my phone. Then I would either email it, I could email it to myself, or maybe add it to my Google Drive through my phone. And then from the Google Drive, I would download it onto my computer.
But if I don't have a smartphone, so how would you do it?
Well, you would need some way of taking a photo of it.
Fine, so I could take a picture with my phone and then let's say either email it to myself, okay, but then my question is, how do you go from the email to the Illustrator?
Well, just like we've done before, you could download things from your email. So either right-clicking on it or downloading it from your email to your computer and then importing it. Does that make sense?
And the way you did it was you copied it and then you pasted it into Illustrator. Is that what it was?
Well, you can we've placed images into Illustrator before, right? File,
but place. I was just having trouble with it. That's the problem. Yeah.
I don't know, maybe if you're having some trouble with it and you want to email me about it, maybe I could help with that. I don't know.
Again, you would go to File. What about File?
Well, once I've downloaded an image onto my computer,
right,
to getting it into Illustrator is fairly simple. It's really a process of going to the File menu and going to Place, which
right.
then allows you to import, anything from your computer into Illustrator. Not anything, not any image from your computer into Illustrator. But
how would you do it? How would you do it? Let's say you would select the picture, you would double click on let's say you have visual design course, let's say, so you would double click on that and then press place.
Yes. Yes.
That's what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So by the downloads, you would double click on the actual thing and then press place.
Yeah, I don't even think you need a double click. You could just select and then press place.
And then press place. Okay, and it comes where? Right to the front of Illustrator or onto a new, like where does it end up like?
It will end up wherever you place it. So let me do this. Let's say I have this color. I select it, press place, and now you can see that it's loaded in my cursor. So my screen is sharing. Here, I'm moving my cursor around.
Okay.
Right, so those two squares, that's an image that I saved. I saved an image of two squares with two different colors. Okay. And then I can click anywhere on my artboard and it's placed.
So your artboard would have to be opened and then it would be into it.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you. Okay, thank you very much.
Sure. Someone asked, are we allowed to use copyright logos for practicing? You are allowed to use copyright logos for personal use. The only problem with copyright that you get in trouble with copyright is if you try to use it in some kind of professional commercial sense. But if you want to take the Apple logo, Google the Apple logo and copy paste into Illustrator and then trace it out with the pen tool, you could totally do that and don't have to be worried about any problems. Okay, so that's the end of today's class. We went over logos, and the next class would be the last class of this course. So I'll see you then.